pal.
Hey there, this is Pete Townsend, and this is episode 35 of Money Never Sleeps, a podcast that looks inside the head of entrepreneurs and at what makes them do what they do. This episode is kindly sponsored by Ireland's fintech and financial services recruitment specialists, Top Tier Recruitment. If you or a colleague need help attracting or retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, I highly recommend you have a chat with the team at Top Tier Recruitment, as they really know their stuff. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com and tell them we sent you. This week, Owen and I did our best to get inside the head of Andrew Patrick White, founder and CEO at FundApps, a London-based fintech making compliance simple for financial services. This was Owen's first time chatting with Andrew, but I know him from his never-ending stream of sharp one-liners on stage at Adminovate, an annual one-day event for the investment funds industry, opening people's eyes to new ideas and challenging those who say, we always do it this way. Talking to Andrew was reminiscent of our interview with Chris Coik from Flender in episode 18, who talked about knowing when to run towards an opportunity and when to run from it. Andrew's always had great discipline as a founder on when to say thanks but no thanks, and I admire his temerity. And yes, just so you know, I had to Google temerity to make sure it meant what I thought it did. This was our second remote recording using the Zencastr app, so the sound quality is a bit different, and we hope you dig it. On with the show.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Here we go again. Welcome to Money Never Sleeps. We're here in WeWork Dublin Landings in the offices of our sponsor, Top Tier Recruitment. I'm Pete Townsend.
And I'm Owen Fitzgerald.
And we're on remotely with Andrew Patrick White, founder and CEO of FundApps. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Hi there, Pete. Good to talk to you.
Great. Thanks for coming on the show. So we met last year at the Adminovate conference in Dublin, and then again this year at Adminovate 2019. I've always watched you guys from afar to see what you're doing, and given my past life in the industry that you serve. And for our listeners, though, maybe just give us a bit of your backstory and how you got to this point, why you're doing what you do.
Sure. As usual, most things in life comes from many years of doing it badly and seeing there's a better way. So my background was as a techie, originally in Switzerland, then in Germany, developed a compliance system for monitoring investment guidelines, and basically saw over 60 customers that we then had at the end that every single client was duplicating the same effort. They were all looking at ESMA's website or the SEC's website, working out what the latest change in regulations meant, getting an IT team together, project manager, testers, forming teams around the regulation and then implementing it. And obviously, as humans do, making mistakes along the way, so that with 60 customers, we had 58 people doing it differently. So I thought to myself, surely, if I could assemble a team centrally that would do that work and then provide, in essence, compliance as a service to the industry. So FundApps basically has that kind of two-pronged approach. We're obviously a tech company, but we have a very large contingent of compliance and regulation experts and legal experts who will then turn and codify regulation into actual algorithms. So from our customers' perspective, all they have to do is upload their data, and then everything that needs to be done and monitored is done for them.
So Andrew, it seems fairly simple. Obviously, identify a problem, put a team together. No problem. What have you found over the course of the journey with FundApps now has been the most challenging?
Good question. We consider ourselves granddaddies at this stage. We're having our 9th birthday this year, so founded in 2010. And 2010, WeWork didn't exist. AWS didn't really exist. So early days, it was a lot of the struggles around, getting office spaces. And I think the biggest challenge obviously was in 2010, 11. The idea of going with a tech startup of 3 or 5 or even 6 people was madness for most even middle-sized institutions. You're not going to entrust them to do work for you. Whereas nowadays, I think it's a lot more common that the larger banks and asset managers are either through sandboxes or suck it and see are basically trying out a smaller vendor. So for us, it was definitely a groundbreaking time to kind of prove to the largest asset managers that, hey, you can entrust us, people to do the job for you. And, cloud was also an issue. As I said, AWS wasn't really known. So trying to persuade a large European asset manager that it was safe to send their data to us on a daily basis was certainly an act of persuasion on our part. And thank God it worked out.
And did you always have the kind of entrepreneurial bug, or was it a case that, like I said, you identified a clear problem and thought that was a good time to go and try solve it?
Yeah, I think it's always a funny question when you see people that are entrepreneurs or serial entrepreneurs as a label. I think, certain people maybe have higher energy levels or have higher propensity to look for change and things. But personally, I saw myself as an employee for many years. Obviously, I didn't take very well to being managed. Probably was one of my defining features. I didn't have too many bosses in my life, but most of them just left me alone and didn't try and do too much what I was doing. So certainly when my old company was sold to State Street in 2008, it seemed clear to me. I see the problem. I know the solution. Well, sorry, no. I'm very confident, as you are as an entrepreneur, that I can make a solution that will people want to buy. And then I think my favorite metaphor of startup life is you throw yourself off of a cliff and you have the confidence that you'll learn how to build a parachute on the way down. And that was basically me, is like, I'll work it out. I always have in life. So I think that was more the kind of confidence thing of just going for it.
Yeah, and just thinking back to Adminovate for our listeners, so they know what Adminovate is. It's a conference here in Ireland that is geared towards the funds industry, but opening up people's eyes to what's going on in terms of emerging technology and fintech and regtech, and trying to help things along in terms of creating the next generation of leaders in the funds industry. And Andrew, the last couple of years, you've been on panels. Last year, I think it was on the RegTech panel. This year on the failure panel, which was quite entertaining. We've gotten back some of the feedback already on the surveys from Adminovate 2019. And one of the surveys said, and there's no name attached to it, so I'm not blowing any confidence here, was that one of the things they didn't like was the entrepreneurs panel this year, and that they said, listen, we're a global financial services firm. What do we have any reason to be talking to entrepreneurs or startups for, right? And I'm like, that's just your problem. What do you say to that?
Yeah, that literally is the problem. I mean, I think that's getting fewer and further between, and a lot of it is to get the foot in the door, which is the difficult part. But sometimes even now with a web demo or, something that you literally, you can blow people's minds by showing them like, yeah, that thing that you're spending 12 hours a day doing in Excel or, X days a week doing in whatever software, we can do in milliseconds for you. So I think the modern technology is, this usual thing. Like 10 years ago, you showed PowerPoint. So if anybody comes to you showing PowerPoints nowadays, be very suspicious. You should be showing technology. And I think that's the kind of that aha effect when somebody sees an app or a website where they can see the problem that they know their bank has being solved very intuitively on a screen somewhere. Then obviously is the big fight of, well, you might have convinced 50% of the team or the buying decision makers that you're a good solution, but then you've got all kinds of vested interests, is where we really, that kind of is the bit that you lose the plot with. Is, we're cloud based. It takes zero IT resources, but the 60-something CTO that's about to retire is over my dead body around cloud or something. So there's always some vested interest, and that's, it's not in the best interests of the financial institution. But let's face it, it's humans that make decisions at the end of the day. So you really need to get through to the right people. And I think, as you probably know, Pete, if you go further up the chain, the CEOs and the CIOs do realize they need to do something. It's kind of middle management that are the blockers generally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was the COO that took every meeting when I was in BNP Paribas with the tech firms that were coming through, whether you're a big tech firm or small. I just wanted to know what you're doing, and hopefully you'd ask me to come work for you, right?
Exactly. We've had a few of those too.
And so I was kind of like the false sponsor. They love me. Like, this guy's being so friendly. I'm like, I'm being so friendly because I want to come work with you guys, But only
that's fair enough.
Only one out of the 100 ever came asking. So, obviously I didn't go in that direction. But, there's... I think there's still some work to do there. But what's encouraging is that when you do, with some of the startups that I work with, when we do go pitch to the corporates, like you're saying, they can see that, or we can see they don't want to look at PowerPoint. I listened or I watched the founder going through 4 or 5 slides to kind of give an overview, and you could see the people in the room from the financial services firm just like chewing their nails and just getting incredibly restless. Like, we want to see the tech. We want to see the tech. From an imagination perspective, what is that? Like, why, now I totally get it, right? But, just sitting there and watching, some middle managers and ops people get impatient because they can't see the tech. Tell me your thoughts on that.
I think there's two parts. One is, there's been and that was one of our kind of remits really to up the bar in software quality and delivery, that there has been, I'm sure it's at BNP you used a lot of shit software. So I mean,
Oh, yeah.
a lot of stuff was sold in the day that look great on paper, or screenshots, or the brochures were really shiny and beautiful, but when you got the software installed, it was a dog to use or slow. So a lot of burnt fingers in the industry that have bought software that didn't live up to expectations. And let's face it, nowadays, and then that was one of the reasons we named it FundApps, is even though we don't create apps, and I'll scream if somebody else says, "Will you fund my app?" It is that era that I can go onto the App Store, click a button, and in 9 seconds I can start using a piece of software. And if I'm a fairly tech savvy, or if it's a very good UI UX experience, you will use it and be a productive user within a minute. So people are just generally impatient nowadays, so they want to cut to the chase and say, just show me some stuff and show me some screens. So I get it, and sometimes PowerPoint can be useful to set the scene or give a kind of overarching vision, but at the end of the day, you are selling a widget, and you need to persuade them that's the widget they want.
Yep.
So Andrew, you're talking about being nearly 9 years old now. What do you think has changed in terms of the skills that you've kind of had to learn or kind of hone over the last almost 9 years as an entrepreneur? We've talked before to companies that have scaled, and founders who've talked about the different skill sets required at earlier stage versus scaling. So what have you yourself found over the last kind of 9 years?
Yeah. It is the eternal kind of that everybody says, back when I used to work in corporate, which, let's face it, most people in fintech and regtech are, they had a marketing department and a legal department and all that. But to really emphasize how much of a shock it is, like this morning I spent 4 hours dealing with property lawyers and landlords discussing and renegotiating a lease on a new building. That's something I've never had to do in my life. Well, the last time it was a lot easier. So suddenly I need to become a property expert, and suddenly people are throwing words like superior tenant and landlord, and words that you've never heard before, and you have to bullshit that you understand what they're saying to you. So every day is a school day. There are you do get into a kind of nice zone where you start to know more and more, but let's face it, every year things change. So over the years, legal, having to learn to read contracts and not be able to outsource everything to a lawyer, doing your own marketing, learning SEO. I was originally a coder, so I haven't learned much more there, except things have changed over the years, down to how to do sales well. So everything basically except what you probably learned in the first few years of your career is going to be new to you, and every day you're faced with a scenario that you probably haven't dealt with before, firing people, hiring people, etc., etc.
From a personality point of view, what do you think have you found has benefited you or hindered you in some respects?
I think being an ex-techie, my kind of attention to detail is pretty renowned or legendary. My company, I can spot a typo from 3 miles away, and that kind of applies to the whole company. The UI, the kind of sales proposal, financial numbers, just making sure everything's correct and you haven't missed a zero or done something incorrect is hugely important. I think certainly going back to the why an entrepreneur, without doubt, I am strong-willed and fairly confident, and you do require that. Like, we were officially bankrupt for 6 months, but the pipeline was still growing. So that confidence of, it's going to happen, where I presume a lot of people would have said, "Shagget, I'm going back to work for a bank," kind of thing. So that kind of, I won't call it undying, but a very strong level of confidence that you're going to get to where you want to go to certainly helped me through the first few years to bring us where we are today. And a sense of humor, let's face it, that's hugely important. Life's too short to take too seriously. So at the end of the day, when you were thrown a real lemon to go down to the pub and have a beer and laugh about it is important too, because you can get very easily stressed in this position.
Yeah, and it seems like there's a combination of a sardonic wit and this hidden optimism in you, Andrew, that just always comes out. And just that hidden optimism, how do you keep that going, and how do you keep that fuel, that fire alive?
You probably bottle it and sell it on TechCrunch or something. Yeah, it is. There's a lot of articles really about grit and tenacity, and I do feel that is probably one of the top 2 or 3 traits that you require as an entrepreneur. Many things, as I think, not taking life too seriously. For me personally, travel has been great for that. I've been left on the side of a road at 4 a.m. in Cambodia with no sign of light, and you just pick up your backpack and walk. So, when you get into a warm office with coffee, nothing seems that difficult anymore. So that there there is a definite kind of not taking it all like a lot of people do too seriously or getting stressed about it, and that comes from knowing also what you've built is good. I think that's important as well, is be proud in what you've done. A lot of people just want to fling something out the door and make some money. So knowing what you've done is valuable to the industry because you've been there before, and then pushing through. But yeah, humor and a kind of very, I won't call it fatalistic, but kind of optimistic fatalism that whatever will be. You can do your best to influence things, give it your best shot, but at the end of the day, life's short, so you can always move on. Don't worry about it too much.
Back that track up, back to back to Cambodia. What happened there?
So bus broke down about 10 kilometers outside of Sihanoukville. There was only a few of us on the bus, so we basically, put our backpacks on and hiked along the road for about an hour and a half. And, as usual, the sunrise came up and somebody offered you a coffee about half an hour in, and actually you were having the time of your life after half an hour, which is also a real kind of, thing to think about life, that you think is going to be terrible and actually turns out to be very pleasant. So,
was that before you started FundApps?
That was 2004 when I went around the world for a year.
Yeah, then I saw your part 2 just before you did FundApps. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
and do you think those experiences opened your mind at all to being able to handle life's challenges a bit better?
Yeah, I think there's two things there. Is one, I'm obviously a tad older than you're at. Well, nowadays they say it's probably 39, but that's of age. There's a certain thing of having been around the block a few times that you don't take things too personally or seriously. I think also, travel without doubt is one of the key ways that you can understand people better, different cultures, different viewpoints. You can even understand a Trump supporter maybe at some stage, or a Brexit supporter, but maybe not.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
But that there is quite a challenge there to communicate well with people, and there's a certain realization that wherever you go along the world, whether it's the highlands of Bolivia or kind of Iraq, where I've been recently, that people they want to have some food, hang out with their friends and family, and have a nice life. There's not too much difference around the world, and that's also something comforting to bring back to work.
Just thinking about again back to the last 9 years, and keeping that business going is awesome. At what point do you think you had something when you realized we got it here? This is going to work.
So we found in September. I think our first client came 6 months later. It was a small amount of money every month. They went bankrupt 4 months later. Happy days. As I said, then we'd no money anymore. Then first big kind of real client came about a year and a half after we'd started up. At this stage, I hadn't earned any money still in 3 years. So it's getting kind of squeaky bum time. First client is always kind of easy because you've done it once. So I think for me it was kind of client 3. I remember walking to work and I just seen an email saying, contract or something, and it was one of the UK's largest hedge funds. And I finally opened the email, and it was a signed contract, a 6-figure deal. And suddenly that kind of transformed us as a company, and that the seal of approval of this kind of household name fund, definitely, I remember walking to work kind of getting that goosebumps of holy cow, this is actually starting to happen now. It's not just 2 customers, it's 3, and we knew we were about to sign 4 and 5. So that kind of the single digit customer numbers are the big ones, because everyone counts, and you certainly celebrate every single one with a good few beers.
Yeah. And do you have that first contract printed and signed and put up on a shelf on the wall?
Not yet, but maybe in the new office.
There you go. And anything you wish you had done differently? I'm sure, listening to you before, I'm sure the answer is yes, but maybe just to share a story or two.
Yeah, I think that the usual thing is yes, a million things. In total, no. I'm very happy where we are now. I think very simple ones in life, and every usual thing you've read it a million times on LinkedIn, but occasionally over time, as you grow and become a different company, some people don't fit in anymore, and I think that's the usual thing, that everybody takes the decision to let somebody go. It just takes too long, and every time we've had to take that unfortunate decision, it's always been, wow, we should have done that a month, 2 months, 3 months ago. So I think that hire fast, fire fast, or hire slow, fire fast that's a definite one that I've every time I've done it is like, yep, you haven't learned that lesson yet. Other ones, I think, as a counterexample, we've been strong on. I know the guys, the other fund companies in Ireland, the fintech companies, the whole thing about proof of concepts and discounts. You get pushed around a lot as a startup, and you agree to a lot of things that you might be comfortable with. And I think that's something that I did well from the start, was always saying, no, we don't do that, or you're going to have to pay for that, or that, that's our minimum offer. We're not going any lower, which I know a lot of companies throw Hail Marys left, right, and center. And then, after a few times, people in the industry know that's your modus operandi. So you kind of ruin it for yourself in the future. So I think good and bad things that I learned over the years, but in general, I think the main point is you should be happy with where you're going in general. It can always be improved in some way, but that the path to the top of the mountain goes in various ways, but you're still going in the right direction.
Great. Listen, obviously Pete knows you well, and it seems like a fantastic story. We know a lot of the funds companies here, but I mean, 9 years in, you're going strong, especially having gone through, like you said, almost or technically bankrupt or whatever. We've heard about Cambodia. Is there anything else that people wouldn't expect to know about you?
I think that is the usual thing, that despite being an entrepreneur and working my way through the financial service industry, I've probably spent over 3 years on the road and traveling different countries. And I think at last count, I'm at 113 countries. The last one being Iraq 2 months ago. So I think that's the thing of, I might be the guy that puts on the suit and goes demos to the largest fund managers in the world. But when I get a spare moment, it's I chuck off the suit, stick on my rucksack, and I'm off to the airport to go to some new country in my spare time. So.
That's incredible. And what drives you to do that? Is it just been always an interest to travel, or?
I think the usual thing of, I think it's probably an entrepreneurial thing, that the trying to test out the unknowns, see what's out there, broaden your horizons, go to new places, climb new mountains. There's always a new challenge there in some respects. So it's definitely pushing yourself out of the comfort zone, because I don't think sitting on the sofa at the weekend would be ever for me. So.
It doesn't sound like it.
No, not at all. All right. Well, great. Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your insight. And we'll be talking to you soon.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Money never sleeps, pal.
So that wraps things up for this episode, but hang in there. We'd like to thank Andrew for opening up his mind for the 35th episode of Money Never Sleeps, podcast brought to you by Norio Ventures and Owen Fitzgerald. It's sponsored by Top Tier Recruitment. Remember, if you or a colleague need help attracting and retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, get in touch with the team at Top Tier Recruitment, as they really know their stuff. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com. As for Andrew, you can find out more about him by following him on Twitter at APWFA. And congrats to Andrew and the team at FundApps for making the financial technologist lists of the most influential fintech companies again in 2019. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe to Money Never Sleeps on iTunes and leave us a review. Each one helps. Or you can subscribe via our podcast website to other media channels like Spotify and Stitcher. So just go to the subscribe page on moneyneversleeps.ie and follow the links. If you're searching directly on iTunes or Spotify, Money Never Sleeps is spelled as all one word. We're on Anchor now too as well, so check us out there. If there's someone you'd like to see featured on an upcoming episode of Money Never Sleeps, drop us a line on info@moneyneversleeps.ie or get in touch on Twitter at MNSShow. Check out the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie for more detail as well. Besides producing this podcast, Norio Ventures partners with fintech founders and established players in financial services to help build new ventures and blaze new trails. We do our best work when we're helping established players and startups simultaneously. Check us out on norioventures.com to learn more and get in touch. In short, we increase the odds of startup success. Finally, we'd like to thank Conan Brophy from Create Sound for recording and editing this podcast. Till next time, thanks for listening. See ya.
Money never sleeps, pal.